Good morning. As a staff here at Argentine Middle School, we need to understand FERPA, the Family, Educational Rights, and Privacy Act. As soon as a child enters preschool, information is collected about him or her. The body of information grows throughout the child's academic career. School records contain highly sensitive information, even information about families. Rapid advances in technology have stretched privacy laws to the limits. The Internet, now in use in nearly all U.S. schools, including Argentine Middle School, opens the door for instantaneous and widespread exposure to student information. As a school staff, we frequently have access to student data. We are also a school that provides one-to-one internet technology access to students, which may inadvertently give others access to student data. FERPA says, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, school districts must maintain the confidentiality of all personally identifiable information in educational records related to students. Any and all records, including emails, student files, and personal information, are generally exempt from disclosure, absent parental consent. Personally identifiable information could be items such as grades, birth dates, social security numbers, student images and videos, locations, residency status, gender, schedule, religious preferences, and race and ethnicity. FERPA applies to all schools that receive funding from the U.S. Department of Education. In short, all public, elementary, secondary schools are subject to FERPA. So as a staff, we need to understand parent and child rights in regard to FERPA. First, parents and adult-age students have a right to inspect and receive copies of student records. Parents and adult-age students also have a right to deny access to others, specifically those outside the school system, with some exceptions. Parents and adult-age students also have access to a process that corrects errors, including a hearing. Parents and adult-age students have a right to opt out of military recruitment. Parents and adult-age students have a right to opt out of the disclosure of a student's directory information. Parents and adult-age students should have access to a complaint process handled by the Family Compliance Office and the U.S. Department of Education. Right, parent and child rights in relation to law enforcement and ICE. Because our population at Argentine Middle School has an 87% ESL population, this is definitely something that our families think about and consider. Districts have a federal obligation to provide equal education opportunities to all children residing within the district. Generally, SROs are not required to report undocumented students. And that's important. There are some agreements with some states, 40 law enforcement agencies in 16 states. Our county and other neighboring counties are not a part of this agreement. The school cannot require or inquire into the student's citizenship or immigration status. If ICE shows up at our school office and seeks access to student records or the students themselves, the school should ask the ICE personnel to identify the legal basis of their request, and all paperwork should first be reviewed by the school's district attorney as per KCKPS. There are a few exceptions to FERPA. The Department of Homeland Security and its ICE Bureau is permitted to have access to student records in order to monitor the stay of international students pursuant to the Student Exchange and Visitor Information System Program, the VISAS. If a student has a health or safety emergency and no protection order, they also are an exception to FERPA. If the student is engaged in a crime of violence or a sex offense and no protection order, they are also subject to FERPA. In the event of epidemic disease outbreak or a campus shooting, for instance, a school could legally share student education records with designated personnel and law enforcement, according to Forsman, 2019. The U.S. Department of Education also states that a school or district must make this determination on a case-by-case basis, taking into account the totality of the circumstances pertaining to a threat to the health or safety of students around them. So there are some unintentional ways that schools accidentally violate FERPA. Schools are responsible for what their vendors do with data. Schools have to protect data, but so do third-party providers. For example, under the current law, a company providing surveillance cameras and software for a school must abide by the same laws a school lives by when it comes to protecting student data. We all use alternate tools such as No-Red Ink or ClassDojo or Padlet. Considering all of these additional tools and the information that these companies collect from our students, it's important that we understand what their protections are when it comes to student data. Secondly, schools must give parents access to student records if the student is under the age of 18. Schools must also give students access to their own records if they are at least 18 years old. FERPA is not a confidentiality law. Staff can talk about what they see. They cannot talk about what they read in a record. Inadvertent email attachments or reply all emails where information is going far beyond those who need to know are FERPA violations. So one of the questions that we typically get asked are, what about cameras and FERPA compliance? As a school, it is our responsibility to consider how cameras could violate or interfere with the privacy of our students. Cameras are acceptable in environments where there is low expectation of privacy, as opposed to high expectations of privacy. Schools are public, thus cameras are allowed, as long as they're not in areas like bathrooms, locker rooms, and other high expectancy locations. So Argentine Middle School has a responsibility to students in regard to cameras. First, we need to develop and publish policies describing the purpose of surveillance cameras and the perimeters for use. We need to install cameras only in areas where individuals have a low expectancy of privacy. We need to notify the school community of the use of surveillance cameras via policies, handbooks, websites, newsletters, and signs posted. We need to establish protocols for maintaining equipment and retaining recordings and apply them consistently. When evaluating requests for access from parents, law enforcement, media, and other third parties, consult the Family Policy Compliance Office's facts on photos and videos under FERPA. And lastly, develop protocols governing requests for disclosure, including the handling of requests for copies. So, how does this affect you guys as teachers? So first, be careful with technology you use in your lessons. Don't use websites that require your students to enter personal information unless it has been approved by a supervisor or your school's technology officer. 2, find out what companies or vendors your school is working with or feels comfortable working with. 3, continue to evaluate the technology you and your students utilize. So keep any student data you have secure. Store your students' data and information using your school's data management system. Don't email information to unverified parent emails. Be sure you're not accidentally disclosing student information to the wrong people. Keep any physical graded material or grade books in secure, safe places. Don't discuss student information with others unless that person has a legitimate educational goal. So when you're responding to access requests, you may communicate education record information with student parents. Be sure you know your student's legal guardians. Under FERPA, parent includes a natural parent and a guardian, or an individual acting as a parent in the absence of a parent or guardian. If you ever receive a request to inspect or review educational records you do not have access to, tell your administrator. As a staff, we can minimize potential data breaches. It's best practice to destroy data that is no longer needed to minimize the amount of data you have at any given time. This reduces the potential for data breach, inadvertent disclosure, and protects the privacy of our students. IEP documents, grades, and other identifiable information fall into this category. For more information on including data minimization, you can go to this website. So in case of violation here at Argentine Middle School, if the department finds that an educational agency or institution has violated FERPA, the department will work with the educational agency or institution to bring it into compliance. Only in those instances where an educational agency or institution is unwilling or unable to come into voluntary compliance will the law, and it is otherwise appropriate, will the department withhold federal funding. Protecting the personal data of our students is important. We need to work as a team to protect the well-being of our students. Thank you for your time and attention.